Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Greg Ferrara.
Good evening, everyone. I'm going to move Marco Rubio's water over here. It is a pleasure to be here with you guys this evening. Wayne, thank you so much for the invitation. Mr. Chairman, thank you for your leadership. And thank you to everyone here for everything that you guys do for your communities and particularly right now in this time of need. So I want to kind of focus on three things as we talk about. I'm here with you just briefly this evening. First, I want to just, of course, give you a little bit about what's going on in Washington. Maybe Wayne should have called me your motivational speaker. I'm not sure, but we'll have to watch those hot sauces that are at your table. You might need to pull the pin here when I'm finished talking to you. I want to talk a little bit about just what we see with consumers and kind of where we see the puck moving. And then finally, a little bit about what I think about in terms of the future and things that I kind of have on my mind all the time. But first, for those that don't know, NJ, we represent the independent sector of the supermarket industry. Simply for us, that means our members are privately owned companies. So we have single store operators all the way up to large regional chains, which are privately owned companies. And these people really are the true entrepreneurs and backbone of America and our economy. They represent over $253 billion in the supermarket industry, of almost 1%, a little over 1% of the U.S. economy. And many of the folks in this room that are part of these numbers. And we thank you for what you do to support not only the communities, but our country. It's incredibly important that we have the diversity of the marketplace for our consumers. So I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of everything that's going on. And I think this slide is very appropriate because we're not really dealing with one issue. We're not dealing with two issues. We're dealing with a whole multitude of issues as grocers. And it's been a challenging time, particularly coming out of COVID. If you think about everything from inflation, which of course we know remains high, remains a persistent challenge in our business and a challenge for consumers. We think about the moving target on tariffs, so whether it's bananas or on dealing with aluminum foil pans and everything in between, equipment. And as that target continues to move, that's something that you have to be cognizant of and adjust to as fast as you can. The consumer continues to change, and I would say the consumer has always changed. But we're seeing that sometimes that pace of change happen at a faster clip. And then we are, of course, seeing how the impacts of whether it's social media or technology and other trends are impacting consumers and how they shop in your businesses. And then, of course, you've got a challenge today that we really haven't seen in decades. Consumers really have the largest distrust of large institutions that we've seen since Gallup started tracking this going back, I think, into the 60s. And today, consumers are more skeptical of large institutions, large brands, whatever it is. And I think that's certainly a challenge for our industry and for the food industry as a whole. And then as I'm going to talk about SNAP here in a minute, but not just what we deal with SNAP cuts. Did we lose the slides? Not what we deal with SNAP cuts or what we deal with the rollbacks of some of the COVID dollars, but just think about what's happening with waivers and what's happening with other pressures on that program, and obviously we're having to adjust with that as an industry. So let's talk a little bit about Washington first as we approach day 31 of this government shutdown and the impact that this of course has had, but it's about to truly have on our industry, and as many of folks have talked about here this evening. SNAP. I never thought we'd be in this position, truly. I never thought we would be in a place where our elected officials, lawmakers, the administration would allow this program to lapse, because we don't know what's going to happen out there. Let me tell you a little about where we are and the latest kind of that we're hearing. One good piece of all of this is that we're beginning to feel a tiny bit of a thaw. And what do I mean by that? I think many folks a week ago, the end of last week, were in more of what I call a hell no position. Well, I think they're starting to recognize and hear the media stories and, quite frankly, the grassroots from people in this room and others, the impact that these not funding SNAP on Saturday on November 1st is going to have to the communities. It's going to have to jobs. It's going to have to local suppliers. And it's going to have to people and families and kids. And I think we're starting to at least have a recognition of the chaos that's going to bring. And then the unknown of what could happen when that occurs. Republicans do believe, and particularly the administration, do believe that this is an inflection point. They believe this issue is an opportunity that they feel is a barrier that Senate Democrats may not want to jump over and may be willing to come to the table and ultimately allow the CR to pass, a clean CR to pass. I don't know. They're basically calling their bluff. We're playing with live ammunition right now, and it's scary. And so we're continuing to push grassroots. We'll talk about that in a minute, just to make sure that we're holding people's feet to the fire. We also have the administration has taken a very, very, very hard stance against this. They have contingency funds for the SNAP program, $4 to $6 billion they could have pulled on, they could have used. They're moving money all over the place at the Department of Defense to fund paychecks for our troops, which, thank God we're paying our troops. But we've got other big programs in air traffic controls and others who are not getting paid, and we're not using those same levers for the SNAP program. The administration also even came out today, USDA did, being very critical of USDA's own data, talking about the impact that every dollar of SNAP that's spent in communities has in those communities. And so you can tell they are really trying to dig in and to hold the Democrats' feet to the fire and keep the pressure on. We know, and you know, the impact this will have in the communities that you serve. There will be people who will go without. We're coming up on Thanksgiving. There's going to be enormous pressures, and I thank the food bank and everything you guys do to support this community. So let's talk a little bit about kind of the pressure we're bringing. I think this is incredibly important. I appreciate the people in this room for a lot of the contributions you've done. Last week we had our executive conference in DC, and we took members of our board executive committee to the White House. And we actually, going to visit the White House during the government shutdowns actually works out pretty well because they didn't have a bunch of meetings to run to. But it became very clear that this was a line in the sand, and the expectation from the administration was that Democrats need to vote for a clean CR or they were not going to fund SNAP. But we were able to share with the grocers around that table the impact that that is going to have to communities. We talked about scheduling, jobs. We talked about all these things that you know every day. And then we also talked about supply chain. We talked about perishable products. We talked about what we anticipate will happen when, let's say, benefits are loaded in a week or 2 weeks or whenever it is. There's going to be a flood of people going to the stores to load up, and that's going to have an impact on supply chain. And they listened and they heard what we were saying, and they pushed on us to really bring the grassroots and the pressure up to the Hill. So what we've been doing meetings on Capitol Hill. A lobbyist has been up there pushing the messaging. We started about a year ago doing a newsletter up to Capitol Hill every month, and it goes to something like 7,000 or 8,000 congressional staffers in the House and the Senate. And it talks about our issues, but what our members are doing in the community and the importance of independent grocers to the economy. But we leverage that newsletter. I've already sent 2 up this week, and this blue flyer, this image, are some of the things that we're talking about to staffers. And we're trying to make sure they understand this is not just about people not getting benefits in their card. This is about jobs. This is about the economy, taxes that are paid when grocers purchase products to sell in their stores for SNAP, that the trickle effect is going to be substantial. And we are starting to see some traction, get really strong open rates on this. And then we have our members who are sending videos to us, and we're able to include those in these newsletters. So we're drawing that connection back to that local grocer. And so that's good that we're seeing that. We're also seeing some pressure from folks like Senator Hawley of Missouri, Republican, who has introduced a bill called the Fund SNAP Act of 2025. That has over 29, as of this morning, bipartisan co-sponsors. And while I don't expect the bill to move, what is important about that bill is it's sending a message to leadership in the Senate that on a bipartisan basis, there are members who are very concerned about this program, and it is time to focus, it is time to reopen the government, and it is time to get SNAP funded and to take care of their communities. But as I stand before you tonight on October 30th at 7 o'clock, we don't have a deal. We don't have a path forward, and we are marching toward these funds not being funded on Saturday, November 1st. And so you need to be preparing. I know Wayne, the Connecticut Food has sent a lot of information out. NGA has, FMI and other associations. Make sure that you are preparing for that, talking to your customers, using signage, whatever you need to make sure you are able to take care of those customers and your team as well. Just also, we talk about SNAP, the flag for you, and I don't think Connecticut has a waiver yet. But we're dealing with a growing patchwork of waivers across the states. And we have the federal government strongly encouraging states and even now incentivizing them. If they want federal grant money, they get extra points in those grants if they file the state waiver or they have a waiver in place to restrict what people can purchase on SNAP. We've always been agnostic on the products. We've never said people should be allowed to have this item and that item. What we've said is grocers are the front line, and we have to implement this. And unfortunately, folks in the states don't fully understand the impact this is going to have. They think, well, it's going to be sugar-sweetened beverages and junk food. Well, how do you define that? And then they start figuring out that we're talking about sparkling apple cider, we're talking about other beverages or other food products they weren't considering. It's very complicated. It gets complicated very quickly. And that's something just I want you to be aware of, that this is a growing problem, and it's something that maybe eventually we're going to have to deal with at the federal level. But the SNAP is being kind of attacked from multiple angles. And then finally, we led a study, and NACS and FMI were part of this as well, just to show the impact that implementing regulations is going to have on the supermarket industry. And you can see over $300 million just for supermarkets alone it's going to cost to implement this federal regulation. And that's going to have a significant impact on local businesses. We want elected officials to understand that and be prepared for that. And then a little bit of good news. We have had some regulations that have been rolled back. We're dealing with refrigerants. We're dealing with traceability. We've made some good progress there. We have an administration that is favorable in terms of rolling regulations back. And we're going to continue pushing them where we can on these issues. So let me kind of move forward and talk a little bit about consumers and where we see kind of things happening with consumers and also with our industry as independent supermarkets. You know, when I was in the White House, one of the meetings we had, one of the staffers said, well, I know you guys operate on thin profit margins. I think you like 3%, right? And I said, well, I wish. Our net profit margin went up. It's like 1.9% right now, and his eyes got big. I said, so we're talking to you about these things. We're talking about very small margin and very small margin for error and the impact that's going to have on these businesses and their viability to be able to continue. So we're glad to see the net profit went up a little bit for independents, but we still know, and I'm speaking to the choir here, expenses are up. There are a lot of challenges there, employee turnover, and those are things that we need to continue to control so that we can remain profitable and be able to serve the communities for the long term. So let me talk a little bit about just kind of what's happening out there, and a lot of this you guys are experiencing, of course. But the speed of change, as I said, that is happening at, I think, the fastest pace than I can remember. You've got the e-commerce evolution. We're seeing now a greater uptick in delivery, where click and collect was the predominant. We're seeing delivery start to grow substantially and outpace, maybe ultimately outpace in some areas, click and collect, and a lot of the resources that are being put behind that. We see consumers' continued focus on health and wellness, right? And it's not just MAHA or dealing with GLP-1s, but more Americans are looking towards food as a way to address chronic disease, a way to be preventative in their health, and to, of course, take care of their families. And that's, I think, a huge, huge opportunity for grocers, and particularly those, particularly independents as well, who do a great job of highlighting local and fresh and healthy products. Culinary fusions, we've seen some crazy stuff out there, but you see these trends explode. Social media has a lot to do with this, whether it's things like Dubai chocolate or you got Asian and Tex-Mex fusion and whatever else is happening out there. As these trends are happening, they're happening fast, and people are coming to stores and they're looking for those products or those ingredients, and they want to go home and follow that TikTok or YouTube or whatever it is to figure it out. As grocers, we need to make sure we're staying ahead of those trends, listening to them, and we're prepared to meet those consumers in store and what they're looking for. And then finally, AI is a big word. We throw it around a lot, like just technology. But the reality is the development that's happening there is happening at enormous speed. We're seeing almost every week or more frequently announcements about what bots and what agentic AI and other tech tools are able to do for consumers, and the ability to go out and say, hey, I want to cook an Italian meal for my wife for our upcoming anniversary. This is what we like, so what we don't like. Can you create a menu? Thanks. Now, can you go procure those items from the store that has the best price, best quality, and I want them delivered to the house by 4 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. We're not far away from being able to do that, and consumers are already leaning in and looking for that ability. So what do consumers want, right? Value, of course, is key. We are continuing to see really a divide in terms of I think, social economic classes, in that you've got the lower middle, and lower income folks are feeling enormous pressure, but even the middle and higher income folks are looking for value. I can't tell you how many people you talk to that say, I can't believe I just paid X, Y, and Z for this. Or I walked out of a store literally with one bag of groceries and it just cost me $65. We know you know what's happening with inflation, you know what that impact is. So consumers are looking for value at all economic rungs of the ladder. And as grocers, we need to make sure we're meeting them there. Convenience, this should be a no-brainer. But I think for any of those that have kids, and if you don't have kids, you do not have a chance to catch your breath. We are running from one thing to the next, and we are looking for every convenience we can have. I'm one of these people that absolutely loves grocery shopping. I love going in, I love cooking, it's how I relax. And about 6 weeks ago, my wife had to go back home to help her mom with some stuff, and it was a Sunday. We were running around, I had to get kids at different places, I had an incredibly busy week at work, I had to prepare meals now by myself, know how even more respect from a wife and everything she does to keep the house running. But I had to do all this, and I did not have time to go to the grocery store. And for the first time ever, I ordered online, and not click and collect, but had it delivered to the house. By the way, those 2 bags showed up, and I could not believe how much I paid for that, but I didn't have a choice. And so consumers are looking for convenience, and we need to meet them where they are and make sure, not just for e-commerce, but in store, how do we make it easier for them? They're not looking for food, they're looking to feed their families, and we need to do everything we can to help them do that. Local, this is where we should be just absolutely winning. Consumers want a connection to local, they want a connection to that community, and the more we can do at grocers to help them get there, to tell the story behind that, I think we can win incredibly well. And I was just talking to our keynote speaker about customer service and how important that is, not just in store, but even the interactions we may have that aren't in face-to-face with a human, right? If I reach out to customer service online, or even dealing with a chatbot, and they solve my problem for me, that's really good. And particularly if I'm going in store and having an experience, that's something I want to make sure that it's a positive experience and I feel good, and people are looking for that. I think particularly as we live in this world that is more and more becoming less human interaction and more interaction with phones and technology, that human connection I think is incredibly important, and we need to be doing everything we can to focus on that. Just to reinforce, local means authentic. I'm talking just in the next slide about stories and what that can mean to build loyalty with your customers. I mentioned about where consumers are and the trust, or the lack of trust they have in big institutions. I think transparency is incredibly important and really a non-negotiable for consumers. And I mentioned health-driven choices. This is where they are. We need to make sure we're meeting them so we can support them. So about 6 weeks ago, we brought a group of retailers, as we've done every year, in partnership with Italy America Chamber, over to Italy. And it's a combination of exploration and meeting with different vendors. It's a fantastic week, long days, but really great. And one of the places they took us to was a rice farm, a family-owned rice farm that they're growing their own rice. They showed us how they're drying it, the facilities they have, and how they're packaging it for retail. And we met the founders of the company, Giuseppe and Rosetta Malati, and while they didn't speak English, they would translate for us, and they told us how they started this family business back in 1986 around Verona, Italy. And we got to experience all that. And it really got me thinking. You look at the product, the Box's risotto, which by the way is fantastic, and to sell that in your store, what is the difference between that and the other 3 SKUs you may have of Arborio rice in your store, right? It maybe had better packaging, I don't know. Maybe it's made in Italy, maybe it's not. How do you make the connection back to this family, the passion they have, what they do for that product, to pass that on to your consumer so that they aren't just buying a product, they're buying an experience, they're buying a story, and it's something they want to take home to their family and share with them. And I think as grocers, we need to get smarter and smarter about that and how to help make that connection. It's not just about putting products on the shelf, not just about putting a sign in front of it. We've got to figure out how to help tell that story. And those who will be storytellers, I think, will be incredibly successful. So what I think about closing out on just the issues, what I think about during the day and even in evening, kind of 4 buckets I brought them down to. One, of course, economic. And I think I look, of course, on the macro scale, and for all intents and purposes, U.S. economy is humming along pretty good. The stock market's, than today, but it's doing really, really well. But if you look at them on the micro level, in communities, you may see a different story. You've got communities that have had plants that have closed, and you've got people that are now been laid off. In our area, in the greater DC area, you've had tens of thousands of government workers that are no longer employed and maybe leaving the area, may go into other positions, but that's having an impact on the economy. And that is spread out really across the U.S. and, of course, impacts all of our industry and the businesses as well. So it's something I continue to watch with caution and how that will impact our industry. On a global scale, look, this is a dangerous world. There's a lot happening, whether it's Russia and Ukraine or China or Venezuela or other parts of the country. There's a lot happening out there. And we need to be cognizant of that, because that impacts our supply chains, it impacts our national security as well. On the social side, I mentioned AI, but we need to be very conscious of the speed of change and what is happening, the resources that are being put into this. And I think as business leaders, you cannot have your head in the sand. You cannot sit on the sidelines. It doesn't mean you're going to make investments like Amazon or Meta, but you need to be doing something. You need to be creating a sandbox and a safe space in your company. You need to be leaning in and finding those tools, experimenting with them, figure out what's going to work. We're doing it at NGA. We've created the guardrails internally. We have policies and procedures and protecting our data, but we are definitely using this and figuring out how we can do this so that our people can be better servant leaders to all of our members and to you. And then finally, political. It's always, of course, on my mind. It's what I do, where I live. But it impacts all of you. And so whether it's the gubernatorial elections that will happen in Virginia and New Jersey on Tuesday, and those outcomes, or the midterm elections that will come up in Congress here in November of next year, and that'll impact on President Trump's agenda, whether it continues or not. And then what happens after Trump? What does that look like? Well, that impacts everything we do, and that's something I want to make sure that I'm thinking about and I'm conscious of. So in bringing it home, I think Wayne mentioned some of our events. One that I would love to have every single one of you here at is the NGA show. It's a fantastic event, close to 4,000 people. We're moving to a new great location, the MGM Casino and Hotel. I think we've already sold like over almost nearly 70% of the show floors. It's gonna be a fantastic event. We'd love to see you February 1st through the 3rd. Las Vegas will be much warmer than Connecticut that time of the year. So hope to see you there. With that, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for what you do in your communities. Thank you for what you're going to do this weekend and likely into the early part of next week. Your communities, your customers are going to be looking to you for that leadership. Your employees will be looking for that leadership. So just in advance, thank you for what you do. And finally, thank you for being here. Your state associations, our national trade associations are incredibly important. And if we don't support groups like this, then Wayne and the team don't have the resources to be your advocate at the State House. And we don't have the resources to be your advocate in Washington, D.C. It's important for this industry to have a voice, because the other side, people on the other side of issues have voice, and they're showing up. And to see a full room like this tonight, I think is absolutely wonderful. So thank you very much. A pleasure to be with you, and I look forward to seeing you later.